The U.S. Department of Energy is cleaning up the Oak Ridge Reservation of residual hazardous and radioactive contamination left over as a result of decades of nuclear energy research. Much of that work has been influenced by the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup operations. You're welcome to attend the meetings and be part of this important work. For more information, call us or visit our website.
So we will start the September meeting of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. Just a couple of housekeeping items. The hot spot, if you want to use it, is Big Orange Country, and that is not for Clemson nor Texas, so it's one of our local football teams. Members, please use your microphones when speaking. Also, remember to put your tent up so you can be recognized. Hopefully I will see it, and if I don't, raise a hand at me or something like that. Put the tent down when you're done. We will have the board members will ask questions first, then we'll allow the public to participate in the question and answer period. Please turn off your cell phones, your pagers, any other communication device you have so as not to be disruptive during the meeting. Our next meeting will be October 8th, and the presentation at that time will be an update on the U-233 project. Tonight's presentation will be an update on the Oak Ridge Stewardship Program, and the presenters are people who are no strangers to this board, Pat Halsey and Sally Brown. So I think at this point we will step into comments from the Deputy Designated Federal Officer. Is that you, Mr. Adler, tonight?
That would be me tonight. Sue is off. I believe her brother is in town, which is a rare event from Chicago, so she's going to spend the evening with him and let me pinch hit for her. Just a couple of things to mention in terms of field progress. Bill McMillan asked me to speak a little bit about the status of the U-233 project. I think everybody knows that's one of our high priority projects to get rid of a large inventory of essentially special nuclear material from the center of Oak Ridge National Laboratory, ultimately transferring it to the Nevada test site. We've been shut down for a period of time as we try to rebuild the arrangement with the state of Nevada to allow us to transfer that material to Nevada. And over the past month, there's been a lot of activity, principally between DOE headquarters personnel and the governor's office and the Nevada Department of Environment and Conservation, to work through questions that they have concerning the actual safe disposal of the material at the Nevada test site, and also a lot of questions that they have about the safe transportation of the material across their state. And those conversations were characterized as cordial and productive, and Bill thinks that we're making a lot of progress at resolving any concerns they may have. Hopefully we will soon, of course, even if I knew what the date for resumption of shipments was to be, I could not share it because that's classified information. But we do not yet have a green light. I can say that. We hope to have a green light relatively soon. Bill McMillan, I believe, is coming to the EM subcommittee, not this time. He actually is, ironically, coming this time, but he's also coming the next month to talk about this project. Bill also asked that I mention a little bit about the status of the Groundwater Working Group. They are making good progress. They have held a couple of meetings focused on the assemblage of large-scale groundwater models that could be used, hopefully, to predict the effects of large-scale off-site pumping of groundwater and utilization of groundwater on on-site plumes. The basic idea is we'd like to be able to know when and if off-site groundwater use should be restricted so as to ensure that we don't pull plumes around and create problems. Those models could be useful for other purposes in the design of investigations and cleanup projects for on-site contamination problems. So that's going well. And as I'm sure you're aware, we also have an off-site sampling program that's being planned, working with TDEC and the state of, TDEC is the state of Tennessee, TDEC and EPA. That program is supposed to get going in the January timeframe. We'll actually begin taking these off-site samples from new wells in January. So we're going to spend some time between now and then working with the state and locally elected officials and the people in those communities to make sure that they're not surprised by anything we're about to do, and to basically communicate our plans and the basis for what we're doing. Over at ETTP, the landscape continues to change. Basically, there are two big buildings left at ETTP, two big gaseous diffusion plant buildings that are left. The progress on the K-27 building isn't very visible because it's all taking place inside the building, but they're making a lot of progress preparing that building for demolition. The K-31 building is ready to be demolished. In fact, if you were to drive back into the site where you could have a view of the building, you can now see right through the building. Since we last met, all of the siding on the building has been removed. That's asbestos siding, so it's a fairly slow process to make sure it's done well, but it has all been successfully removed, neatly stacked, bagged up, and they're now in the process of transporting it over to our on-site landfill in Bear Creek Valley. So basically what we're looking at now is a big skeletal remain of a building. They hope actually to get some characterization done through the pad of that building so we have a good understanding of what's underneath the building, hopefully very little, and then start demolishing the building, actually cutting it apart and pulling it down, beginning probably the first week of October. So that will be a milestone for us. How long it takes to finish that job will be a function of how much money we get, and we don't know how much money we're going to get. So we're saying that it should be done somewhere between, let's see, late winter and late summer. There's about a 6-month band of time, and it'll just be funding dependent. If we get the money we hope to get, we'll be getting it done pretty quickly. And by done, we mean pulled down, chopped up, containerized if necessary, and shipped over to the on-site landfill. So once that's done, we will have a large contiguous tract of land at ETTP that is available for redevelopment. About a 200-acre tract of land that has all the power, all the roads, rail service, everything that you look for in an industrial park. So that'll be hopefully an opportunity to create, to convert from a cleanup program to an actual redevelopment program. That's it. I guess I should put in a plug for the Environmental Management and Stewardship Working Group Subcommittee's meeting this coming Wednesday. I won't be there because I'll be out in Idaho, but Bill McMillan, the project director for Oak Ridge National Laboratory, will be there, and Dr. Good will be there, and you'll be hearing about the groundwater working group's efforts. So that'll be happening a week from tonight. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Adler. Very enlightening. Next on the agenda is the Environmental Protection Agency, and I believe we have Ms. Jones on the telephone.
Yes, you do. Thank you. Good evening. I don't have anything to add based on the projects that Dave mentioned, other than the fact, and Dave, don't kill me, there have been discussions last week or week before about the Outfall 200 issue, and I think we're trying to work through some the matters regarding that, but Dave did a very good job of bringing you up to speed and the status of the projects at the East Tennessee Technology Park.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. David very vigorously nodded his head in agreement with the Outfall 200 project.
Yeah, actually, let me just jump in for a second. What I believe Connie is referring to is there was a meeting in the last week or two, not last week because I was in Nebraska last week, but the week before that, where the leadership from EPA Region 4 and TDEC Nashville and Oak Ridge got together and just kind of basically talked about all the cleanup program. And a principal focus of those discussions was the Outfall 200 mercury treatment plant, this plant that's being proposed to clean up water exiting the Y-12 plant. The principal focus of those discussions was on what should the engineering configuration of that building, of that facility be, what treatment capacity should it have, how should it deal with stormwater, and how clean should the water that comes out as effluent be. And those are all issues that are still under discussion that hopefully will be resolved so that we can all target a construction start date, I believe, of 2017 for beginning construction of the plant. So Connie, that's what you're referring to, the meeting we held?
Yes, David, was.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's it.
Thank you both. Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation.
I would like to take this opportunity to showcase our new deputy director, the division director, our head of our office, oversight office in Oak Ridge, Ms. Chris Thompson.
Welcome, Chris. Welcome to Oak Ridge and to the Site-Specific Advisory Board.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
John Owsley is still assisting us. He still provides us, with his expertise and advice. But Chris is in charge right now. So I'm going to be very careful what I'm saying here.
You're being taped.
Yes. I agree with comments, that Dave and Kani provided. This is pretty good outline of discussions that are happening between tri-parties.
Great. Thank you very much. Moving on to Section 4 of the agenda, the presentation. Tonight's presentation will be on the Environmental Management Stewardship Program. And our two outstanding presenters are Pat Halsey and Sally Brown. Pat Halsey's responsibilities include serving as the coordinator of the Oak Ridge Federal Facility Agreement administrative activities and the lead person for maintaining the agreement's administrative record. She has been responsible for these activities first with Martin Marietta in 1989 and then with the Department of Energy beginning in 1995. Her duties have been expanded in recent years to address the defined scope of the Oak Ridge Reservation National Priorities List site boundaries and tools necessary to support the information generated, required, and approved during remediation activities. That's an awful lot. But Pat is no stranger to this board. For 10 years, she was the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board Federal Coordinator prior to Melissa joining us. She's an Oak Ridge native and holds a bachelor and master's degrees in chemistry and mathematics. And before you jump in, Pat, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our other rock star, Sally Brown, who's been an environmental scientist since 1998. She began her career as a field sampling technician at the Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama, on a Department of Defense project. She started working on the DOE-EM project in Oak Ridge for Restoration Services in 2000. Her roles over the last 14 years have included waste generation forecast support, subcontract coordinator, RCRA post-closure permit compliance, and since 2005, the long-term stewardship coordinator for the Water Quality Program. Her responsibilities as a stewardship coordinator include reviewing CERCLA decision documents, working closely with the stewardship implementing organizations, tracking and maintaining stewardship, writing the stewardship sections of the annual remediation effectiveness report, and conducting the CERCLA 5-year review site visits. Sally has a BA in environmental studies and a minor in geology from the University of Tennessee. So we welcome your presentations.
On the first slide, I wanted to point out that the Stewardship Committee has been very effective in Oak Ridge for many years. And as we started into the work of the FFA, there was an in-use working group stewardship committee formed to work strictly on the stewardship requirements. And I took this quote as from the goals of that group. And stewardship was defined back in 1998 as the acceptance of the responsibilities and implementation of activities necessary to maintain long-term protection of human health and environment from hazards posed by residual radioactive and chemically hazardous materials. And that's exactly what stewardship is meaning here in Oak Ridge. I put two drivers up there in CERCLA 121. There's a section that deals with the 5-year review document, which is a document or information that is fed to to the president every 5 years, and EPA has that responsibility to assure that the remedial actions that we have taken at the different sites are being protective to the environment and the human health. And you're going to hear me really emphasize those terms: long-term protectiveness of the environment, and human health. In Section 31 of the FFA, we have language in there that stipulates that we will be preparing the 5-year reviews and submitting those every 5 years for the regulators to review. And again, at the bottom, you'll see that it is to be reported for the final remedial actions to assure that human health and the environment are being protected by the remedial actions implemented. So stewardship means to me that we have to have the tools in place to assure that that protectiveness stays in place. On this slide, I introduce the meaning of stewardship controls. You'll hear terms like land use controls, land use objectives, engineering controls, and we'll go into a little bit of details in the next couple of slides about those. The mechanisms that we have, that we use, is the pre and post remediation FFA primary documents, the annual RER that you're familiar with, the 5-year review for the remediation protectiveness, our surveillance and maintenance programs, and the controls that we put in place. All right, in your handout, you've got a better slide of this that shows, it should be easier for you to read. So if you could turn to slide 4, you'll see that we start the planning of stewardship with the signing of the ROD. That is our decision document. In that ROD, we stipulate what our land use objectives are. And those are pretty much like, we're going to clean this area up for industrial use. We're going to clean it up and not allow the use of the groundwater in this area. And it's very high level. Those are the objectives. More down to the working level, you'll have the land use controls. And there's 2 types of controls that we put in place. On the chart, you'll see that we have engineering controls, and we cannot implement those immediately because they have not been performed with the signing of the ROD. The land use controls are the ones that we can implement some of those to be implemented immediately upon the signing of the ROD. And as soon as they are defined in the ROD and they are implemented, then we start tracking those controls. Examples of the land use controls are property restrictions and notices. Those are like deed restrictions. If we are going to transfer that land to some other group, or if we know that we're going to leave a cap in place, we actually prepare a deed given the exact boundaries of the cap and where we've left waste in place, and we place that in a deed and leave those at the county realtor office. And other examples are fences. We can put fences up immediately if we know we need additional fencing. If we know that what we're going to be doing requires more security controls, those can be implemented. So these are types of things that we can implement immediately. The RER is our reporting mechanism. So anything that has been implemented as a land use control is talked about and addressed in the RER. It's not just the monitoring, the tracking of the monitoring that we have in there. We also have the land use controls. So at number 1 and number 2, that's pretty much what I'm trying to convey there, is that in that RER, you're going to find not only the monitoring trends of how effective the remediation's being done, but you're also going to see the land use controls tracked, those that have been implemented. All right, once we've completed the engineering controls, and those are like excavation, putting in caps, source controls, like in situ grouting. Sometimes we just grout a tank rather than digging it up and removing it. If it's grouted in place, then that's the engineering control that we have performed. So once we get through the engineering controls, we create a completion document. And once those completion documents have been put in place for the work that has been performed, we drop down in the green box where it is accounted for as part of the stewardship program. Okay, so long-term stewardship in the green box has different kind of mechanisms that we watch for. The operations, if we put a water treatment plant in place, we watch over the operations of that water treatment facility. The standard maintenance that we perform is continued. Monitoring is performed of the groundwater, which shows the effectiveness. And then we go around and verify that the deed restrictions that we have put in place and transfer the lands are being done correctly and abided to. Some of them we just go out and survey that they're still in good conditions, like the caps. Do they need some kind of corrective measure taken? So these are the types of activities that we will be tracking during the stewardship phase of the work for long term. And then we've got the reporting mechanisms for the public to know what's going on within the stewardship program. That's being conducted under the annual RERs, which is the effectiveness report, and that happens annually. And every 5 years, we produce the 5-year review report, which is the protectiveness report. Is that remediation that we took at that site still protective? So that gives you a real good game plan as to what needs to be done, if anything more. And then we've got also added to our tool list a map for the public to be able to view and see what kind of issues have been addressed. I keep waiting for somebody else to click the button. Okay, the next 2 slides, I've listed the primary documents from the FFA that we utilize to address stewardship requirements on the reservation. The first and foremost is the ROD. And again, that reports what the land use objectives are, what remediation activities we're going to be performing, and what controls we're going to be utilizing. As we move, a very recent report that we have started doing is for effectiveness reporting. We have generated a new watershed only. We don't need these at the single unit rods, but remedial action reports comprehensive monitoring plan. And this allows us to make sure that we are being consistent and doing exactly what we need to do in order to confirm the effectiveness of the work. There's closure documents or completion documents, the PCCRs. And then after we finished everything at that rod, we button it all up in a document called a remedial action report. That comes at the very end, and there's only one RER for each rod signed. That's where we need to go back and relook at the whole area that's addressed by the rod and fine-tune those long-term stewardship and the land use controls. So that's a very important document, but it takes us a while to get from the watershed rods all the way to the RARs. And then we've got the remediation effectiveness report, which is a primary document, and it's produced annually. The tools that we're going to be discussing this evening. First, and my GIS expert has just arrived to help me with this part. We're going to be talking about the electronic tools that we have in place and are still building upon. We've got a GIS system which is mainly developed for the public to be able to see the site where we're conducting the work, where we know the contamination exists and what's been addressed and how it was addressed. And we'll show you that in just a few minutes. We're also going to talk this evening about the Oak Ridge Environmental Information System, known most as ORIS. That's where we maintain all of the sampling data that has been collected prior to the ROD being signed and after the ROD has been signed. So any environmental data that is collected to identify what we need to do and what has been done is stored in ORIS. Then we're also going to talk about the land use management application, and that's where Sally's part jumps in. And it's not really an electronic tool, but it really belongs here, is that protectiveness report, the 5-year review. Okay, this is the GIS, and Janelyn, we're going to open it up when I get to the addresses for the screen. In 2013 and 2014, we made a lot of decisions as far as to what exactly is the Oak Ridge Reservation MPL site. There's an Appendix B in the FFA that's titled Oak Ridge Site Description. For years, that has contained the entire Oak Ridge Reservation. It mentioned as a sideline some of the watersheds that have been contaminated, like Lower East Fork Poplar Creek, Clinch River. But what we've done with these environmental baseline surveys is go out with a very small amount of funding in our world, not your world, and convinced ourselves and the regulators that these areas have never been used by DOE or any federal organization and has left contamination in place. So those have signed. The results of that have been placed into the FFA by approved modifications. I'm on the second bullet, where we made changes to both Appendix B of the Oak Ridge site description and the Appendix C Oak Ridge remediation sites. Notice again the terms that are used there, Oak Ridge site. If you go back, which I guess I love to do, the FFA is my Bible. I've worked with it for 25 years this year. And we needed, there's verbiage, but we called our FFA the Oak Ridge Reservation FFA. That's misleading to the public. That's misleading to anybody that wants to move into this area, that the entire site is contaminated. It's not. A majority of the site is not contaminated. So we now have a public accessible site that will show you where we know contamination exists. That link to that GIS system is in Appendix B. We also made changes to Appendix C, which is the Oak Ridge remediation sites. And that's a list of every site that we know of that could have or has been known to contribute to environmental contamination. So we have fine-tuned 2 different sections of the appendices. Appendix B now contains the new map of the Oak Ridge site. Actually, this year, when we submit our updated Appendix B, it will show all of it's clean. That's what Janelyn's going to show you this time. And all reservation units and areas determined clean were removed from the Appendix C listed in the Appendix B. Okay. Giving you 3 addresses. And I'm going to tell you right offhand that the second address is wrong. If you go into the first part of it, to where it says services, if you type in that much, you can follow the trend to get to the cleanup areas. But if you write it in exactly like you see it right here, it's not going to show up. You have to leave off that term Oak Ridge in front of cleanup areas. So if you remove that, you're okay. You're going to be into the GIS map. There's a shortcut to the GIS map. That's the one we're going to enter into this time. And it's it's publicly available, and it's very easy to get into. So, Janlin, if you'll show.
While we have a little bit of a lull in the action,
Okay.
could you explain a little bit the difference between the Oak Ridge Reservation and the Oak Ridge site?
I will right now.
Okay, good, all right.
Oak Ridge Reservation is what we own. Oak Ridge Site is the defined areas that have been contaminated by federal operations here. Okay, it's still coming up. This is the GIS system. You're all familiar now with seeing maps available on the internet. I do. Thank you. This map represents the Oak Ridge site. All right. Got it. Okay. You'll notice right now the red line going around this area is the Oak Ridge Reservation. That's the boundary line. The purple areas are the watershed areas that have been known, they're known to be contaminated. For instance, this is ETDP, and it's got both the Zone 1 and the Zone 2 land area covered. Bear Creek Valley, and these figures are directly from the RODS, and I'm going to talk about that when we get into the ORIS section. Upper East Fort Papa Creek, which is Y12, the NNSA site. This is Chestnut Ridge. We've got a lot of quarries and landfills in this area that has not been addressed yet. You can see a little purple one here, that South Campus facility. That was a single unit ROD that has been completed. Down here we've got Bethel Valley, which contains ORNL, and then Melton Valley is here. The pink areas, well, there's one other that I want to point out. This is White Oak, White Wing Scrapyard up on top of Pine Ridge, and it's purple because we've already got a ROD for it. It didn't do much. It went up and they just removed all visible debris that could be seen. But wherever you see the purple-like area, RODs have been written for those. The pink areas are identified as contaminated. We know that there's contamination there from the program that we went through that developed the environmental baseline survey. And you can see down here, Melton Valley is going to be greatly expanded because of some of the contaminations that we detected in that area. And then there's other little spots from different places where we've got buildings and known releases all along the way. The very dark blue sites are sites that are very operational at this time, but we don't know of any contamination that has been released. This one is the SNS location. This is a firing range that's still being used. And this is a Y12 maintenance facilities for trucks that are being used. So the red line is the Oak Ridge Reservation. The colored portions are the Oak Ridge site, contaminated areas. Now you'll also notice that we've got hash marks or lines drawn along the Clinch River, and those represent that we've got contamination. We know we've got a contamination in there. We've got a rod that covers the sediments and the ecology along in Clinch River, and down into Lower Watts Bar area. And then you'll also see the hash marks for the Lower East Fork Poplar Creek work that has been done. So if it's purple or light blue, there has been a rod. We're just not finished there yet. Okay. I wanted to point out some of the icons at the top. The most important one to start out with is the question mark. That shows you the help that you can get for what's in this system. This is exploring the map, and it tells you how to use the map, to the mouse to do it, or the keyboard, or toolbar, and then it shows you the layers of the map contents. Can you show us that one? Okay. This is very specific as to different layers in the GIS system, and tells you what you can do, what's being, it's definitions for every one of the layers and what's available for you to be able to view. For instance, transportation would show the primary road systems. Does it have secondary roads? Secondary roads, and seemed like there was something else. Okay, so then we break it down into areas that we know. These are the color codes that were used. You'll notice we don't have any more of the tan, which is the areas that we knew and thought were clean, but have now been proven that way and approved. If ever groundwater moves in that direction or there's a release, we're right back into the FFA process. We can add back into Appendix C at any time any movement of contamination out of the established boundaries at this point. Okay, so we've got the transportation, the structures, that gives you the facilities, the off-site facilities, the fences, remediation areas, streams, where, and if you click on these in the layer list, then these will become visible to you. Boundaries and zones, natural features, imagery. All right, let's go back. Go back out of this section and go down to the bottom two maps. That one. There's the Oak Ridge Reservation map. There it comes. All right, this just shows where is the boundary of the Oak Ridge Reservation. Has nothing to do with the FFA at all, but it was the first identified MPL site listing. Okay, and the second map is the Oak Ridge site map. So if you ever want to just print it out, this will allow you to print it out. And this one actually shows it all the way from Salway Bridge down to the Lower Watts Bar Dam. So it's the entire MPL site. Okay, now go back to the icons. Okay, some of these are very obvious anyway. The panning means you can move the screen back and forth. The plus and minus signs with the zoom in and the zoom out. I always do that reverse. That's why Janelyn's here, to keep me straight. But if we could zoom in, I think that's the term we use on the reservation. You can bring it more in focus. Let's see, go now to the book shape. This one I like. We have created fact sheets for all of the watersheds and the areas that have been contaminated under the FFA. So if you want to know something about Clinch River, let's just pick over here, Janelyn, in the Clinch River area. It'll bring up what was addressed, the sediment contamination, how many acres we addressed in that. There's a fact sheet, don't bring it up yet, but it also links to the ROD that was signed, the RAR, because we've completed that work, and that's that one document that ties everything together. And then there's a remedial action work plan just for people that are interested into exactly what was done. Now, if you'll go back to the fact sheet and click on it, this is a fact sheet format that the SSAB Stewardship Committee determined that they wanted the information in. First off, since this is for the public, the first question is it safe? And this is a very quick read on whether or not it's safe. We've got people that are fearful of going swimming or boating in the Clinch River because of potential contamination. So very quickly, it is safe for boating, skiing, swimming, and fishing. And then we've got a little advisory about limiting the amount of fish that you should actually consume. So there's some limits written in here. And then, are there use limitations for this area? So that's written out for each one of the watersheds and the publicly available areas. A little bit of background as to what's been done or why we did it, and then was the problem addressed? Well, in this case, we addressed part of the problems with the Clinch River. We still have to address the surface water, so that information would be in here. Okay, go back out to our, okay, I'm trying to go quickly. Then the information, exclamation point, if you'll just pick one, I don't care much where, that's fine. Did you select it?
I did. I think our internet connection here is.
Okay. Well, let's just move on to the layers. There's a little stack of documents. The imagery slide allows you to make it sharper and clearer for the imagery from the GIS portion. And then the data slide, which I really like and use quite a bit, kind of allows you to see the buildings through the purple and the pink areas that are on the reservation. Okay. And if you live close to the reservation, you can also find your home, but I'm not supposed to tell you that. Okay, good. All right, try the, see, when she's moving the data, can you, down towards the bottom is OR now. And go back with the slide all the way out. And all you see is where the contamination as a total is suspected to be. And then as you bring it in, it allows you to start seeing the buildings that are underneath that area. And then you can select, I guess, go back, let's see. The remediated, do the remediated areas. Can you get Melton Valley there? Yeah. Okay. Okay. And the areas that have been remediated are in the orange slashed marked areas. That represents all of the caps that have been placed on it. Okay, so there's a lot of use for this tool. It's mainly developed for public access to information on what's been done and what is needed to be done. Okay, thank you, Janlyn. Now, ORIS, and I'm going to try to go through this a little bit quicker because I don't have to go out on the website, but I really want to emphasize that I'd love to get my support for the ORIS system in here to really show you some of the enhancements. It's neat. The ORIS database, the Oak Ridge Environmental Information System, is available to the public and to the regulator parties. You can see all of the data that has been collected. The FFA requires this database, and I'm not going to go into all of the detail here. And And then I talked about the enhancements that we're making. They're related to single rod units and the watershed sub-project activities. It allows us to define exposure units within ETDP. And you can select one exposure unit and just see what kind of data was collected for that area. So it's like moving from a storage database where you just have access to the data to something that actually represents an area of the map and what data that you need to combine and average together to make the decisions. It also contains all the data that Lynn Sims and Sally use for generating the RER. Let me see. The second bullet talks about what we're currently working on. We are now placing into the ORIS, the spatial query tool is what we developed to show the tie to the GIS maps. The shape files are now being defined. Now, shape files must be attribute defined. In other words, the shape needs to make sense. Always before, all of the drawings and the maps that we had in our primary documents were strictly drawings. They were CAD drawings. They were not related directly to the sampling locations. So it's going to be quite a feat to go back and redevelop the shape files for those areas, but very important. The shape file, we can get definitions by actual land surveys, and we do conduct those for capped areas. Those are required by RCRA. And then we can also go out and just walk around with the GPS instrument and get the actual RA reading for that boundary. Or we can validate, use the validated sample location data. And it's that third one that we're trying to develop. This is the entry screen into ORIS. I need the pointer. Within ORIS, you get the main tables that you've always been able to see if you've ever gone into here. But right up here in this corner, there's a new location for the spatial query tool, where you're actually able to conduct different game plans, so to speak, with the data. I've got a wounded thumb, so I can't use both hands to do this. When you enter into the spatial query tool, you'll see a map like this. Those blue spots, right now it shows that what's lit up with the blue spots are the sampling locations. We've got over 14 million data files that are collected into the ORIS database. Then other things that are available, there's a lot of things in here, but we're going to be adding spatial, the shape files into this as well. But right now, you can go immediately down to ETDP, see all the exposure units that have been defined, get the data that was actually pulled together and presented in a primary document, and you have a link to that primary document so you can see from step 1 to step Z. 1 to infinity. Let's go from A to Z. How that decision was made at that site and what was conducted and what did the data look like after we finished the remediation. Okay, this one. Okay, the spatial shapes, the shape files are going back. This is Melton Valley, and defining exactly where the shapes are that we used. And right now you'll see on here shape files for the capped areas in in Melton Valley. So those are actual shape files for Melton Valley. We still have some work to do because you're supposed to have a shape file or you're supposed to have a map for wherever you've got land use controls in place. In other words, we've left contamination in place. This summer I had an intern work with me, and the task that I gave her was to create the shape file for the lower East Fork Poplar Creek, because that's the one that goes through the city of Oak Ridge. When she first started, she took the rod and defined where the lower East Fork Poplar Creek under the rod was where it started and where it ended. And we found out it actually started here in real close to Lake Reality. I had always assumed, based on maps that I had seen, that it started after it left the Y12 area, but that's not the truth. So defining these shape files well adds a lot of credibility to the work that we've done. It goes all the way down to where the lower East Fork Poplar Creek enters into the Poplar Creek area, which is down here. So we now have a shape file. Well, what defines that shape? The boundaries of the lower East Fork Poplar Creek is from the edges of the creek on both sides to the 100-year floodplain. All right, we had a floodplain defined back in 1995 by TVA. Since then, we have, if I went to Janlin's GIS system and asked her to bring up the 100-year floodplain, it would go in a totally different area, and it's based on FEMA's information. So here we have defined the shape that actually best represents the work that was done for lower East Fork Poplar Creek. What she had to work with is all the sampling locations that were done. Within those, this is down, let me go back for a minute. There were 2 areas for lower East Fork Poplar Creek where we had to do excavation. At the NOAA site, which is around here, and then at the Bruner site, which is in this area. Yeah, it's in this area. Okay. This is the NOAA area, close to the old Ben Franklin car. I always have trouble with the next dealership. Thank you. What she did, the purple spots are where we have sampling data from all the sampling that was taken in the 100-year floodplain. She took the excavation files, the actual as-built drawings that were in the remedial action report, and then tried to coordinate the findings of those. Well, in some instances, you see, the light blue dots are the multiple status sample locations. And that seemed a little strange to me that we were going into that level of detail. This pink area is remediation pending sample locations. That is a land use control area. We have not performed that remediation, so we have to watch it. We have to report on it. That the back lot of the old Ben Franklin, it used to be the Ford dealership, has not been remediated yet. And so she found the sample locations in the GIS system for ORIS that pointed out where that excavation needs to be performed. The red dots is where the excavation sample locations were taken, and they weren't that deep. And then the multiple status one, There was a study done during the midst of this program where at the NOAA area, it was determined that if we cleaned up the first 18 inches of soil, we had removed everything from that area that would have been contaminated. That's based on the history of the floods and the washing from the Y-12 area. And that was proven to be the case in several instances. So we've got multiple status sample locations that show that we did the excavation and it's clean. This is as far as she got. The red ones should probably also be turned to blue, but her time here ran out before everything was finished. And then the purple is the no action required sampling locations. These did not have the reading for mercury that would cause us to go out to do the work. All right, so as far as land use controls, the only one we're concerned with is this one. The rest of it's clean. The rest of it's determined to be remediated, satisfactory. And these are the shape files that show the excavated areas. And here's our land use control area, that little purple slot behind the car dealership. Okay. So that's where we're going with the ORIS system. There's lots more flexibility. I'd love to give you a real detailed walkthrough of the ORIS system and what it can do and where we're going. All right, this one, in closing out, this is basically is saying why we got into, why did we start expanding the use of the ORIS system. And there's some history in here. I was very concerned about the administrative record, which I'm also responsible for, because the FFA allows us to not retain hard copies of the actual data information as long as we store everything appropriately into the database. Well, all we were getting for years was hard copy paper. It's hard to get people convinced that, oh, you can just get rid of it, that it's not important. So we've been archiving tons of paper every year to satisfy that need. I wanted a system that actually supported the administrative record directly and tying it directly to every primary document that's coming out. So that's what we now have. That's been done. All right, and so I just really want to open your thoughts up for having us come in for more detailed information about the changes in ORIS and how we can use that system.
The U.S. Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Reservation is the site of a vital national defense facility and a modern computational and scientific center. But over the years, parts of the reservation have been contaminated with radioactive and other hazardous waste. DOE has been busy cleaning up those affected areas, but much remains to be done. Citizen input is a valuable part of that effort, and DOE welcomes advice from the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup of the Oak Ridge Reservation. The board provides input on a wide range of environmental cleanup operations underway at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12 National Security Complex, and the East Tennessee Technology Park. You can be part of this important work by attending the monthly meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. For more information, call or visit our website.